Hi, I'm Paul Tranny, and do you ever run into those people that's like a legit designer, painter, and published award-winning author? They're so good. Well, we have that person here, Ash Huang. She is a multi-talented artist and designer this week on Make It. Well, welcome, Ash. It's good to have you here.
Thanks, glad to be here.
Yeah, super excited. Of course, we have a number of things out here on this table. You are a multifaceted designer. My job is to talk you up because I think you are pretty amazing. Because you're a writer, you have essays in Fast Company and all these Lean Out, Off-Screen Magazine. You have a self-published novel, right? And you're doing a ton of cool things, and I think it's super exciting to see and just kind of pick your brain and get to know who Ash is. What is your background in?
So my background, I was very traditionally raised in Swiss typography, got a degree in communication design. From there, I went to do websites. I was doing a lot of like scary flash ads for like McDonald's and photoshopping out.
Yeah, or I don't know what you're photoshopping out, but yeah, I agree. Yeah, we were all doing that. And we owe half of our career to that stuff.
And then fortuitously, I happened to be here and had some friends of friends and so on. And so that's kind of how I got into designing stuff for tech or doing apps and sites and all of that.
Did you just kind of work for various companies like throughout your career? Is that kind of your path you've taken so far? Or?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of everything where I started off, you know, super digital agency with all of those tropes and fun things. And then, you know, worked for startups, worked for a couple companies. So I worked for Twitter and Pinterest. And then I freelanced for a couple of years, still in Silicon Valley, and worked for a whole bunch of different companies like Dropbox and smaller startups. And,
wow.
Yeah.
I know you're working full-time now for a company, but how did you like freelancing?
It's funny, I loved freelancing. Basically, it was because I had hit this place where at the job I was at, I was kind of presented with a bunch of options to move forward that I wasn't that excited about, and I wasn't ready yet to stop making stuff, basically. And so I wanted to become really good at design and craft and everything, but I also had this inkling where, you know, from the time that we're kids to even like through adulthood, we have our schedules and everything dictated for us, right? So this was the first time in my life that I really had more unstructured time to myself where I could actually start scheduling what I wanted to schedule. So I actually discovered a lot about myself, discovered a lot about how I like to work.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's like, well, maybe I will wake up at noon and work till 2 a.m.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That sort of thing, right?
And the next day you go to a museum.
Was that how it was for a while? Did you have a weird schedule?
Yeah, I would have like weird schedules. It would be like, you know, a lot of places I would go and work 3 days a week out of their office, and the rest of the time I'd be like, all right, now I'm just gonna go drive with my dog and hike in the woods on a Thursday.
Yeah.
Just like whatever I need.
What was the turning point going from freelance, sleeping till noon 3 days out of the week? I don't know, what changed there?
I found myself wanting to work with people again. First of all, I was becoming a little hermetic because if you leave me to my own devices, I won't see another person for 7 days, and I'm like, oh, that's just totally normal and fine, and I'm totally happy. But it takes a toll on your social skills. So I was starting to feel a little weird about that, and having some forced interaction was a good thing. But yeah, I was, you know, the instability was really fun for a while, where it's you have all this variety, all these different clients. But I kind of hit this point where I was talking to my husband, and I was saying, you know, it would be really nice if I just had one client that I went to during the week, one team that I'm familiar with, and you know, maybe even I'd have a desk there or something, but I wouldn't have all this back and forth, running around chasing all these different jobs. I'd actually be able to work on something for a set amount of time. And he was like, yeah, that's called a full-time job. And
That's funny.
I was really resistant towards that, just because there's so much baggage with oh, I'm an independent designer, I'm free, I can do whatever I want. But yeah, it's been interesting navigating that, but also finding that if you find the right job with good people, you can actually have most of your freedom still.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the grass is always greener places.
Totally.
And I tend to glorify freelance. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. You do whatever you want. When really it just means you end up working all the time, because when you're not working, you're trying to get clients and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, and there's just no boundaries. That's what's really nice about having a full-time job versus freelance is there is a point where I go home and I can go do all of my other stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like again, we all have, ebbs and, peaks and valleys in our career and even in our day job. And it's nice that you, probably like many designers I know, go home and then they get to work on other creative things.
Totally.
Because here you kind of make me sick when you're like, hey, I'm going to publish a book. Who does that? You do this. It's so exciting. Do you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know you have some of your, I would just say this, more of your graphic design pieces. Mm-hmm. Let's just act like that's on a shirt.
Here's one. Yeah.
a number of pieces like this, which are super fun to look at. And this is what I think is super interesting about you, because you could ride the whole graphic design train for a while. Like, okay, I'm going to work in InDesign and Illustrator. But you're like, no, I'm going to go ahead and, because you have this, if you don't mind, did you get into painting as well?
Yeah, I did. So these are some studies.
Did you have even a painting class in school?
No, it was definitely really traditional, more like the stuff where it's very vector-based. And
You're good, is what I'm saying. Look at this. And is this just from, again, just kind of studying, and you're like, here's a reference photo. Let's just kind of...
Yeah, so these ones in particular, these two are actually based off of a painter's painting. So it's layers and layers of abstraction, but that's one of the things that I do is I'll study the painting to get color and everything, because I got some color theory in school, but it's very spot color, where it's if you have a red next to a blue, it does this type of vibration. But it's been fun to learn things about mixing paint, which is just so physical. And so this is funny because this is the first physical painting I've done in years, but I had been painting digitally because I was too scared to actually put it in the canvas.
You're right. I'm so glad there's an undo. I love this.
Yeah.
Here, there's no undo. And you notice
totally.
the different colors. Again, and that's what I love about this is the amount of color that you've used here.
Yeah.
You can definitely see that teal in it and everything.
Well, what's funny is there's only, so I washed it basically entirely in teal, but then there's only 3 or 4 paints, paint colors that just get mixed, and it's just a super limited palette, which I think it's fun approaching painting from that design standpoint, where it's try to use as few things as possible and use constraints.
Yes.
Because I think it's really scary if you have all colors available to you.
Yes.
Anytime.
Is that what you've learned as a designer that helped you be a better painter, is through those constraints? Only use a certain number of fonts.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting because I feel like I had a very formal design education and I've spent a long time designing and everything, but that process of learning how to design has also taught me how do you actually go through getting yourself through a new craft or hobby or whatever you want to do. Just because it makes it easier for you to understand how to teach yourself how to do something, so that you're not just overwhelmed by the sheer mass of all the stuff you could do.
And you can easily get lost in it, whether it's a bunch of paints on a palette or even in Photoshop with all these various things that you do. It's let's simplify it, because at the end of the day, designers only use, again, just a certain number of fonts.
You just need circular,
and that's what you do.
Millennial pink.
Yeah, and that's what I love. That's what I love about, again, your work is obviously it's definitely a study in sort of almost in graphic design minimalism to a certain degree. But I want to shift gears, right? Because I want to talk about your writing career, if we can.
Sure.
Because here you are, a designer. You're like, what'd you do? I think I'm going to write a book today. Is that how it went? How did you end up writing not only essays, but also this book that I have in my hand?
It's funny because I started writing the essays as one of those habit-forming things. So I just literally took the first letter of the alphabet and I wrote an essay about something that started with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way till Z. So it's you write 26 essays. There's enough structure that you have something to do and you know what you're supposed to do next, but enough freedom that you can kind of pick up on whatever inspires you at the moment. And some of those essays are terrible, and especially in the beginning, but you can see at the end versus at the beginning, the essays are longer, they're actually structured, they're about more interesting and deep topics, they're not so superficial. So that was kind of how I got into essay writing. With the book,
What is this called?
This is The Fire Steel. This is my book. It is a novel. It's 328 pages, which is kind of wild. But yeah, so it's kind of a magical realism book about, it's very atmospheric love story about a guy telling the story about his 20s to his niece, and kind of how we remember things, or selectively remember things. So it starts off in ancient Rome, and so he tells it like a fable, basically. And then, it goes to Camelot, and then as he gets more and more present, it gets
Don't give it away. You want people to buy the book.
Oh, yeah,
by the way. So I'm going to ask you kind of the same question, how has being a designer maybe helped you be a better writer? Is that like a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of concepts, I think, in design that carry over to writing. So it's a lot about craft, but it's a lot about also, it's like, what's the story you want to tell? I wrote the first draft of this, and I was like, all right, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. Like, let's do this, like, National Treasure-esque Nicolas Cage plot, And then what ended up happening is I read it, and I was like, this is, like, bananas. There's like so much happening, and like, why is any of it happening? And so from that though, I was like, oh, what the story actually is this like act of remembering and nostalgia. And so I literally ripped everything out. Okay. And I created that backbone of like, you go through the eras and he kind of like goes through his experiences. So it's very similar to, the design process where you don't know what you're making at all. You're like doing user testing. You're just like putting everything down that you can think of, brainstorming, and then you kind of figure out what it is you're actually trying to say, and then you kind of like create out of that.
And do you think stepping back helps that a lot? Like you do with design. I've spent too much time on this. Let me go over here and go do something and then come back.
Yeah, in writing, actually, they have like formal like slang around this where you like put it in the drawer and you don't touch it for 3 weeks. That's like a normal thing to do with the draft.
And it's the same thing with artwork, approaching it from a fresh eyes and from a different perspective in general. You think it helps designers to even like study writing or storytelling?
Yeah, I think it's just helpful to study everything, right? It's like if you go to a museum and study paintings, you'll figure something out about design.
It seems like you seem to know that everything is kind of connected. I don't know, maybe being a better writer has helped you be a better designer.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
And also, I wouldn't be afraid to use those processes at the same time. Like even when I was writing the book, I went through like all these cover iterations. So when I'd procrastinate, I just like designed a new book cover. But it was funny because you can see as I'm getting better at the book, the covers get better and they become more like crystallized. So it's like this
as
other
the story becomes clearer, so does the cover?
Yeah. And so it's kind of a fun way to like, jolt yourself out of it. I mean, every book I write and I would do like a visual mood board. I have a playlist to like kind of snap me into the mood. And I actually never got to this point when I was freelancing, but that was kind of my next thing where I was like, oh, every client, I'll like make a playlist for that client and listen to it before. So it's just like using these like other kind of like media to get you in the place you want to go.
Yeah, exactly. Would you consider yourself a disciplined person?
It's funny. I think I'm very either really disciplined and then not disciplined at all.
Because when you mentioned even doing the essays, A to Z, I would stop at B. No, not really. But I'd make it as far as B, and I did not start at Z.
It is funny. I think if I had done the essays like privately, but I did them on Medium, and so people saw them. I didn't have
accountability,
many people.
some public accountability. Yeah. So, and you just, like, you fascinate me. You're like, okay, written a book, and it's won, some literary fiction awards. But then there's other things. Can I take a look? Because there was also this, again, you just bust out, hey, I think I'm just going to start making my own money.
Oh,
Is that what's happening here?
Yes. So basically, this is what I call a promise coin. Has none of the weird connotations, but like, basically, like what you'll do is you give this coin to someone you make a promise to. So it says like where is bond on the back, and there's just a lot of symbolism here with like old school promises. This is like a Jupiter stone, which is a whole Wikipedia trip. I just like the idea of these, like, especially I'm doing a lot of digital stuff, like having physical tokens or totems of ideas is like very interesting to me. And again, this is almost like with the theme of accountability, where it's like, oh, it's like a promise is now something I can touch and hold and give to someone, and then like get back when I fulfill it.
Wow, that's thoroughly fascinating and just like way cool. It inspires me to make something like that. And then this piece, by the way, I'm sure it'll look better on you. What's this all about?
I basically was online and I night bought a bunch of seed beads. I was just like, if someone stopped me, I'm buying like 2,000 seed beads. Like, what am I doing? So I bought this. And so this says fearless in Morse code. But again, with like kind of like this totem, that's like something I'm kind of into, is just as like objects of power that are like very intimate and like a relationship for you and maybe one other person.
I have 3 questions I'm gonna finish with. One is, can you name me your favorite writer?
I will say I love Margaret Atwood. I just think she has great breadth and great ideas. So she'll write something.
That's why you're watching that series right now.
Oh yeah, The Handmaid's Tale. Yeah, she goes from writing really important science fiction to like she's written another book that is all about the Iliad told from Penelope's point of view. So she writes like everything, which I love.
Do you have a favorite designer or illustrator, somebody that interests you now?
I mean, I'm really in deep with Alice Lee and Ryan Putnam are my good friends who are just doing like really interesting stuff lately.
Okay.
Yeah, you should definitely check them out.
I will have to check them out. Third really tough question, Friends or Seinfeld? Which do you like?
Ooh, I'm gonna have to say Seinfeld.
Seinfeld it is.
Yes,
all right.
I'm secretly an old man inside.
Ash, thank you so much for being here. Tune in next week as well. We're going to have another fantastic artist, designer, illustrator that will either get you jealous or, I don't know, inspire you. Super fantastic.